Good morning from Mission Control Houston, and welcome to today's International Space Station update. You're joining us now inside of the flight control room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, looking down as the Orbit 2 team is manning their consoles, monitoring all these systems on board the International Space Station. Today's team is once again being led by veteran flight director Paul Dye. You can see there in the light gray vest. All the teams here in Mission Control today following a dress code paying homage to one of the great flight directors in NASA history, Gene Kranz. Beside him is Capcom David St. Jacques, serving as the communication link between all of our teams here on the ground and the astronauts up in space, and he'll continue to serve throughout this Orbit 2 time period. And then meanwhile, our astronauts on board are the crew of Expedition 34, and they're being led by NASA astronaut and Kevin Ford, currently on his second flight into space. He's there in the front row on the left. Behind him, two Russian cosmonauts, Oleg Novitsky and Evgeny Tarelkin, the two rookie space flyers on their first flight into space. And over there on the right, rounding out this six-man crew, is another Russian cosmonaut, Roman Romanenko, Canadian Space Agency astronaut Chris Hadfield there in the front, and finally, all the way on the right there, second NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn. Pretty busy day for these astronauts on board the International Space Station today. A couple of maintenance activities and also quite a bit of robotics activity taking place on board. Starting off with Commander Kevin Ford, who a little bit earlier this morning was doing some in-flight maintenance. He was going through the U.S. laboratory on board the station and inspecting some of the windows throughout. Following that, he moved on to doing an ozone sensor check inside of the Biolab glove box before moving off to his major activity today, and that's going to be focusing on the station's robotic arm. He and his fellow crew members reviewed all of the DUG and robotics procedures. DUG is the interface used to receive and display real-time station arm joint angle telemetry onto a laptop on board the station. And following all that review, which they just completed a short while ago, they'll be doing a walk-off and getting their hands on for the first time to maneuver that robotic arm around. Moving on, our Russian cosmonaut Oleg Novitsky was continuing some work he was doing yesterday inside of the Russian service module, also known as Zvezda. He's been doing a few repairs to the interior and installing some overlay plates. Following that, he took some time to participate in the Uragan experiment. It's an ongoing Russian investigation into developing more methods for natural and man-made disaster monitoring. So he was doing some observations of his own and quite a bit of photography. Another Russian cosmonaut, Evgeny Tarelkin, meanwhile on board the station, was doing some routine maintenance on the comm subsystem throughout the Russian segment. He was assisted by by Novitsky throughout, and also teams on the ground. A little bit after that, he went on to participate in a study of the cardiovascular system under specifically graded loads. They were using the Velo on board the station. That's one of the stationary bicycles. It's located over in the Russian segment. Our third Russian cosmonaut, Roman Romanenko, was continuing some work on the plasma crystal experiment, which looks at small dust particles and other colloid-shaped particles suspended in fluids on board the International Space Station. He was also involved in some cargo operations, taking some items out of the 48 Progress vehicle currently docked to the Earth-facing side of the International Space Station. You can see the full station structure there with 2 Progress and 2 crewed Soyuz vehicles currently docked. So he was transferring a few items in and out of that vehicle before moving on to doing some routine maintenance on this Russian segment's Electron system, which helps generate some of the oxygen for the station atmosphere. Meanwhile, Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield will be participating in all of those robotic arm operations today. Also doing another run of the InSpace 3 experiment this morning. InSpace 3 looking to obtain data on different fluids containing ellipsoid-shaped particles that change the physical properties of the fluids that they're suspended in when subjected to varying strength of magnetic fields. And then just a little bit later this morning, he'll be participating in a public affairs event, talking to Canadian media across that country. That'll be immediately following today's ISS update at 11:15 a.m. Central Time, 12:15 p.m. Eastern. And our final Expedition 34 crew member Tom Marshburn spent a few hours today inside of the Quest airlock working on some of the EVA or extravehicular activity tools. He was doing some maintenance to the PGT or the pistol grip tool, which is more or less the drill that these astronauts use when they're outside of the station. You can see Marshburn inside of Quest doing some maintenance on that pistol grip tool right here. Aside from that work today, he'll also be joining Chris Hadfield and Commander Ford in all of their robotics activities, getting a chance to get his hands on that robotic arm. You can see it here as they do some walk-offs and have finished reviewing all of their Doug procedures and robotics methods.